My name is Don Edward Patton. Most people, when they pronounce my name, say Don E. The E is the initial. Just recently, I had a birthday. February 7th, 1951, I was born, so I'm 74 years of age. Basically, I would say I'm a lifelong resident of Cairo. The only exception was when I was in college. I was gone 4 years, attended Quincy University for 2 years, 1969 to 1971, and transferred to the beloved SIU, Southern Illinois Carbondale. Graduated there in '73 with a degree in a bachelor's in administration of justice. Uh, I, I was born in Cairo. People my age were born at home, and I'm sure you picked that up while interviewing some of us wisdom seniors. I was born at my grandmother's. We lived at 105 Pyramid Courts, and it later changed after I grew up to McBride, but I was born at 202 Pyramid Court. There was a driveway, it's on 12th Street side, 100 Road on the 12th Street side, actually where the landmark is for the contraband camp. My grandmother and my granddad lived at 202 PC. I was born there. Dr. Bass, I'm sure you've heard that name, delivered me. My mother and father, my dad was Freddie Patton. My mom, Lester. They later got a divorce when I was in the 6th grade, but up to that point, we lived there, and I attended school at the schools here in Cairo. So I'll stop there and let you ponder your. On my father's side, the Pattons, they came from Mississippi, Prentice, Mississippi. It's southeast, I believe, of Jackson, Mississippi. My father's name was Prince. He had a brother named Freddie, which that was the name of my dad. Freddie spelled his name Patten, as opposed to Patton. And their mother's name, which would have been my great grandmother, her name was Dora. On my mother's side, whose name was Zeddy, and my grandfather's name was Willie. My grandmother would call him Bill Teller when she was mad at him. But on my grandmother's side, my great-grandmother was from Louisiana. And they made their way to Arkansas, and then later to Missouri, and she lived a great deal of her life in Wilson City, right across the bridge, near Watt. And on my grandfather's side, I can go back as far as near South Carolina. And right now, my great-granddad names escape me. I want to say his name was George. My grandfather had 2 brothers, Uncle Mac. I remember Uncle Mac. He lived uptown on 32nd Street, and there was a bakery on Washington Avenue, and I would always anticipate Uncle Mac coming. He would walk all the way down to Pyramid Court, but he would bring us this buttertop coffee cake every Saturday. That was a treat. So that's basically our family. Now, I did have some brothers. Actually, there was my parents. My mom had stillborn twins. They were born at death. And then my oldest brother, he was 7 years older than me. His name was William Patton. And my youngest brother was 2 years younger than me. His name was Jerry Patton. They've been deceased now, Okay, my oldest brother died in '68, and my youngest brother died in '69. Well, that's from what I can imagine. After they left Mississippi, they lived in Tennessee, Weakley, Tennessee area, and they had numbers. I guess they were sharecropping because there were numbers, you know, such and such 10 and whatever. That's where the family kind of grew up. But then, if you understand the history of Cairo, Cairo was a very vibrant hub for African Americans at the late 80s, or from I would say from 1865 on up to about, 1960s. And so there were jobs here. You know, you could work on the river, you could work at the train station, you could bricks, you know, there were all types of jobs. So I would think, I believe that's what motivated them to come to Cairo. Because at the time in 1900, about 1905 or 6, the population was about 15,000. Of the 15,000, close to 6,000 were black. Well, that one for me, I have a vivid understanding of who that person is or was. It was my great grandmother. Her name was Mattie Wisdom, Wisdon. And fortunate for me, I had many opportunities to talk to her. She passed a day after Christmas on December 26, 1965. She was 93. I was in the 8th grade, so I would talk to her. I would see her every day. She lived with my grandmother at 202 in her later years, and I would talk to her about growing up, and she would tell me stories about picking cotton. And the one thing that she said one day they were picking cotton and she heard all this noise, this huge noise above them, and it scared them. And she looked up, and that was the first time she had seen an airplane. And I used to spend time talking to her, listening to some of her stories. At an early age, when I was 5 or 6, she lived in Wilson City, so we would go over to Wilson City, which is 8-10 miles, and spend time over there. They had the outhouse, they had the water where you had to pump so it was pretty primitive as opposed to living in Cairo, but I enjoy going over there. Like I said, when she would tell me those stories, I would just ask her questions about, how did that make you, when you heard that noise, what did you do? And she said that, it was just, I had never seen a plane before, airplane, and it scared me. But once I understood what the plane was, the cotton part, she would talk about how hard it was to pick cotton, and in hot days, and I just, at the time in the 8th grade, I couldn't necessarily imagine that, but now looking back, that had to be a horrible way to make a living. Yeah. Before that's my great grandmother.
Okay. Good picture there.
There's. I'm sorry. Wow, that's a big one there, because there's so many. Growing up, basically I had a fun childhood. And so there would be different impacts, I suspect. I recall going to the hospital for the first time. I think I was about 5 or 6. And my parents told me, I asked them, Carroll had a cab system back then. And, 630 was a black cab. And they called the cab, back then you would call the number 630, please. First of all, the operator would say, operator, please. And you would say, well, would you send a cab to 105 Pyramid Court? And back then it was only 3 numbers, and then later it became 4 numbers. And then the addition came 734, that sort of thing. But they said I was going to the hospital, and they said we're going to go see the doctor. And basically, what I found out later, I had tonsil problems, adenoid problems, and had I not had them taken out, the doctor said I probably would not have lived very long because my breathing passage was really bogged down. I couldn't breathe as a kid. But I remember it as not a fun time for me because I didn't know where I was, man. They put me in this ward, and someone said, it was segregated. Yeah, it was segregated, and I saw all these black adults, and I started crying. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. And fortunately, my loving father talked to the hospital, and they found me a private room. And he was there with me at least 48 hours. He would just sleep like that on the edge of the bed. I think I was there like 2 days. In terms of other impacts, certainly attending the black parochial school, St. Columba, was impactful. Had a lot of good friends there. The nuns were from the Art of Holy Cross out of Notre Dame. And so we got a good education there. I was an altar boy, served Mass routinely. If you're a Catholic school, you have to go to Mass every day. So I went to Mass every day, and it would be my turn to serve. And also, there was, apparently the priests had a pact with other priests throughout the area. If they went on vacation, we would go and serve that Mass. So had an opportunity to go with the priest, one other altar boy. We would go to Mound City, St. Mary's. I remember doing that. I remember going to St. Anthony's in Murfreesboro. And I remember St. Pat's and St. Joseph. So, I would travel with the priests. So I don't know how much more you want to hear this, but in 5th grade, actually it was a 6th grade, because this is about impact, right? Mm-hmm. For the first time, that was an eventful year for me because I was in the 6th grade. My parents got a divorce. And then about a week before school started, the priest from St. Joseph, which was an all-white parochial school in 1962, came and talked with my parents and said, they're closing St. Columba School, and we would like for your 2 sons to attend St. Joseph, which was an all-white parochial school. And so about a week before school, we ended up at St. Joseph. My brother and I, and probably maybe 20 more African-American students that were going to St. Columba School, and we ended up there. So I had never been around people that didn't look like me very much, and so that was a very, in some cases, awkward experience. Very intimidating at times, and I'm sure it was intimidating for the people that didn't look like us as well, as students. And so I adjusted, I can speak for myself. One of the saving graces, I think, for me was they had a basketball team. And my brother and I were pretty good, and so we played sports throughout our tenure at St. Joseph. So that was impactful. So I will stop there, but those are a couple things. And then later I went to high school as well. Yeah. Well, yeah, so then you get into my high school years. That's 65 to 1969. And so the first 2 years, they hadn't, well, the school was already integrated. School was integrated in 1952, by the way. Thurgood Marshall came on the stage. I tell folks, Thurgood Marshall and people like John Lewis, they honed their skills in Carroll. John Lewis started out one summer. he sent a message to Foreman in Atlanta saying, "Hey, I am at your disposal. If you got something for me to do as a freedom fighter, let me know." And he said, "You know, there's this town in Illinois called Cairo. We're going to send you there." And that's how he came to Cairo and as president of SNCC and trained the nonviolent workers to integrate the bowling rink, the restaurants, and also that famous picture where SNCC had where let's come and build a world together was taken here in Cairo, which later they printed thousands of as their calling cry to come join us to build a better world. And so that happened. But with respect to Cairo High, the first 2 years, there was a small population of black students. And then in 1968, 65, yeah, they totally integrated the school. So it was already integrated, but in other words, they consolidated the school. So Sumner closed, and Carroll High became a school where it was totally integrated. We had, I want to say 530 students. My class had the largest class, 128 graduated with me. It was during the 68 period of time where things got really difficult in Cairo. People didn't get along very good. And as a result of that, it was turbulent. It spilled over like in the sports because you could only have so many teams you played. But in 68, the basketball team was very good. We went all the way to the super sectional in Carbondale, and there were only 4 teams. There was Carbondale, Mount Vernon, Cairo, and Centralia, and we played Mount Vernon. They beat us by 10. But so that was the fun part of 68. And then the year before that, 67, we had not totally integrated the baseball team that I was on. We went to the state, and right now they got 4 and 5 divisions. Back then there was only 1 division. There was 380 schools that played baseball, and if you're fortunate, you got to go to the state. We were the last 8 teams standing out of 380 schools. Chicago Mathers beat us 3-1. But that's the first time I'd ever been out of Carroll that far, man. I enjoyed every bit of it. But the point is that there were only 3 of us on the baseball team. My first cousin, Millard Bondurant, and Charles Compton. But we got along with everybody on the team. We played, and so that shows you what sports can do. It brings people together during that turbulent time in the 67 to 69. But yeah, getting back to, I recall, I don't know what brought the National Guard then. I don't know that had been something at the roller rink or the White Hats threatened somebody or whatever, but I could hear them 3 o'clock in the morning. They had those army boots on. Click, 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 click. And I'm thinking, what is that? And I looked out, and there were all these National Guard soldiers surrounding the project. And I had no idea. I was saying, what did we do? I haven't done anything. And so they surrounded us for at least 2 or 3 days. If you left, you had to prove that you lived there. That was, to me, harassment. I never did understand that. I mean, we weren't necessarily doing anything, so why you lock us in? And that was difficult. But I always thought that was, looking back, and even during the time, I just thought that was totally wrong. Well, it impacted me in terms of movement. I was working at the time. I think I might have been 70. I might have been in college, but I was working at the time. So you come back and they, ask you, do you live here? Yes, I do. And it just, at night, you had to be careful. As a youngster, you know, you don't realize that the danger, but my buddies and I, we still were able to party. Yeah, but we would still party as college students. I mean, you just have to blink your lights a couple of times, let them know there were some codes that it was you. But we still like went to the Cavalier Club and Mound City and those kinds of places for fun. When you're 20, 19 and 20, you know. But it was just something you had to adapt to. It was, again, you know, I lived in the 100 road. You know, you heard people that lived in the 2 and the 800 road. We all got along fine. You know, our parents made us accountable. I mean, we had to mow the grass when, you know, my father said, it's time to mow the grass, guys, and we mowed the grass. We had to be in when it got too late. We all played in the parking lot or the playground, which was next to us. Played in the summers, softball, baseball, basketball. So we all got along. I mean, we were pretty close. And fortunately for me, my cousins, my dad there was 6 of them. So all my cousins lived within, you know, 100 road, 200 road. We all lived right next to each other. So we all played together as well. Well, probably, if I think about a lot of memories, but you know, family is everything, people oftentimes say. And I remember, you know, my father was the oldest. And then there was Aunt Evelyn, there was Aunt Lydian, and Aunt Evelyn, we call her Aunt Big Baby. Aunt Lydian, we call her Aunt Sane. Uncle Millard Patton, we called him Uncle Plute. And then there was Edward, the professor. He graduated from SIU, taught at Florida A&M. But where I was going with this, we didn't own a car. Uncle Plute had a car. Uncle Mike, Aunt Elsame, I forgot Aunt Elsame, they had a car. So when it rained, they would come by and they'd come by and pick my brother, and there'd be 8 of us in the car going to school. And that's what family would do, you know, as opposed to any other time, though, we had to walk. Like a day like this, you had to walk, but if it was raining, they'd come by and pick us up. Yeah. I remember that. That was, well, school was always central for me, especially when I attended St. Columbus on 14th Street, because Carroll had about 11 schools, and right down from St. Columbus School was a playground there called Douglas, and during the summer, we played baseball. Every day we played baseball. But alongside of that was the Twin River Baseball League, which was all black league. You had Little League, Pony League. And it kept us out of trouble. I played with the Dodgers. Teams didn't like us because we won all the time. And our manager would buy us nice suits, but everybody had nice suits. But I guess we thought it was part of it. We thought we were good too, and we would win championships. But it would, you know, people just, it's where Bungie is now, from 6:30 to midnight. It would be the black community would be there watching baseball, and so that was central. As a kid, I didn't straddle too far. Mostly 100 road Pyramid. I didn't even go way over on the 800 road very much. Now there were some stores around there I would go, like there was a Asian American, William Seed. He had a store there. The Johnsons. If I wanted, they didn't have the cookies on my street on 12th. I would go over there. But I just stayed in my little area, and one time there was a case of mistaken identity. My father came home one summer in the afternoon. He said, "Come go with me." I said, "Where are we going?" And he took me to this Asian American store guy, and my dad said, "Is that him?" He said, "No." He said, "Well, he's trying to say you stole something." And I'm thinking, I rarely come over here. So I had gotten mixed up with someone else. But no, that was a story. I think I've forgotten your question though. What was it?
Which places and traditions were central to
Oh,
you
yeah.
and your community.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people have talked about the swimming pool. I want to correct the record on that as well. You hear people say that the swimming pool, before any blacks ever swam in the swimming pool, they filled it up with concrete. That's not true, because I think it was 68, they opened it to blacks, and my cousin and friends, we would go almost every other day to the swimming pool. Now, the following year they closed it up, I guess because there's too many of us coming, but they I think you've heard that we never got an opportunity, but there was just to be factual, there was an opportunity where we got one summer to swim in the swimming pool.
Your
Well,
teen years or
Yeah, well, for me, I hear that a lot too. I interacted, once I got to St. Joe, I interacted with people all the time. I've heard, you couldn't go to the St. Mary's Park. I played baseball there. I was on the baseball team. I was never afraid of St. Mary's Park. Now, maybe I wasn't there at the right time. I remember when Washington Junior High, they used to have the 8th graders, when you were graduating, they would give them a day off. They would go to the park, just as a treat. And I didn't go to Washington Junior High, but I had a young lady I was trying to see, and I would show up, and swing and all that. So everyone has, and that's important too. Cairo, everyone didn't necessarily have all the same experiences. And I think that's a myth too, that we all had the same experiences. Not to say what people said was false, I just didn't have that experience. I played baseball at St. Mary's with St. Joe. I played baseball there at Carroll High. That we won, and we played double headers. And I would travel, we would travel, we was only 3 of us on the team. We would travel to like Valmeyer, play a doubleheader in the morning. Valmeyer would eat our lunch, go to Columbia or Waterloo. We traveled, so I didn't have some of the experiences some of the other people had. But even some of the people my age group didn't have the same experience as me, and I don't know why. But and that's not to say that they're wrong. It's just that I didn't have that experience. I don't know. Just from a sociological point of view, I mean, and I would say for women, that was for probably pretty much women in general, but for specifically black women, but also I would say black men, there were only very few professional jobs that you could be in Cairo. Teachers. And as a result, we had excellent teachers. I mean, because back then they molded the black child, they made you accountable. They taught you the basics, reading, math, all those great subjects. And so, but if you wanted to be a banker, that door was not open. If you wanted to be a business person managing a business downtown, that door wasn't open. So that's how, and that was the sign of the times, not only in Cairo, but throughout America. Oh, yeah. So you had the doctors, Dr. Chambliss, Dr. Robinson, and then, I used to work at a health clinic, but growing up, you had the little mom and pops, like over by Bennett School, you had the Blue Angel, 2 sisters operated the little cafe across from Bennett School. And so they had a little jukebox. You can go in there and play Marvin Gaye, get you some candy or a hamburger. There was a Star Cafe over on Poplar, same thing. You get hamburgers. And then you had Booker's, who had some of the best hamburgers. And there was a guy named Cook. He sold 45s. Younger people wouldn't know what that is, but it was a record, like a donut. And, you could get the Temptations. He would come by, knock on your door. You need any? My parents, and they say, well, do you have that one by Brooke Benton? Yeah, we got that. Yeah, you want that? Yeah. And then, I don't know anyone's talked about this. That was the policy guy. You know anything about the policy? Yeah, the policy guy was the guy that sold the numbers, taking out insurance. You know what you want to pay? Play today, 555. So it was a policy guy. In other words, there were entrepreneurs that we would call today entrepreneurs. There was always somebody trying to make a little money on the side, and so I remember those individuals that you had the barbers as well, and yeah, and you had carpenters, masons, those sort of guys. I've lived a very full life at 74. I would say I've been a journeyman. I've done a lot of different things. I was the first person to integrate the Community Mental Health Center here in Cairo. They hired me in 1974. And it's interesting how I got that job too. I was sitting up in class in Quincy University, and it might have been psychology. Yeah, it was. And I had a paper to do. And I had to come home for Easter break. I said, you know what? I'm gonna go by the mental health center and interview I've never been bashful, but I'm gonna go by and interview the director. I went by and interviewed him. Excuse me. And when I graduated, he remembered me. And he said, I liked you then, and I think you're a very capable person. He hired me in 74, and I eventually became the clinical director. Left there, became the healthcare administrator at Community Health. I did that for 17 or 18 years. At one time, we had 150 people out there, and I didn't have direct supervision, but I had supervision. I was over maintenance and the social services program. We had $1 million budget. And so parents too soon, substance abuse, you name it, we did it. And then since I was over maintenance, we had other clinics. I would travel once a week to Rosie Claire, which was basically a white population, Cave-in Rock. Had good relationships with everybody, Carbondale. Then worked a little bit at State Farm, became an agent. And then I worked at SIU, pre-medical, so I've done that. Well, obviously the population has dwindled tremendously from the time I grew up here. When I grew up here, it was 9,200. And so now I think it's 1,700. And so when you see that kind of dwindling of the population, there obviously there's some challenges that are going on in the town. And so that's big impactful. My wife and I decided that, there's a purpose why we still need to live here. And so that's the reason why we're here. We're very purpose-driven people. My work with the historical project is purpose-driven. Her work with our church and students, taking care of Mom, it's all purpose-driven. And otherwise, I don't know we will be here. But when you have a purpose, it gravitates you. It allows you to anchor yourself, and so that's where it is. I think, though, in terms of gravity, in terms of movement, I've seen a lot of positive kinds of activities going on in Cairo, and I just hope that they continue. Yeah. Oh, several times. Yeah. But you pray on it and you ask yourself, and so, actually, I'm probably more urban. I'm an urban person, and I like cities. I like to be able to go to a restaurant that served my favorite meal. I like seafood. I like the vibe of the city. Now, do I like the crime? No. But but I do like the city, the urban life, and so Carl and I started going to Nashville, and actually that's where we spent our honeymoon, in Nashville, in '73. But we would tell people, man, like in the '80s and '90s, Nashville is the place to go. And people said, why Nashville? And we would tell them in the early 2000s. They said, why Nashville? And now everybody wants to go to Nashville. They want to stay. It's now Nashville. I wouldn't want to live there. I would go there, but it's just the infrastructure is not. They don't have mass transit or anything like that. And so now everything takes you a long time to get around. At 74. I could probably live, my wife and I could probably live anywhere we want. But right now we're taking care of Mom, who's 104. And so that's what for sure keeps us here. Now, if something happens to her, I don't know. We'll probably maybe still be here, but that's what's keeping us here, So, yeah. Wow. As a kid, I would cherish Christmas because Carroll used to have a fantastic Christmas parade, man. It was huge. You had the Belleville Black Knights, you had Sumner High, you had Carroll High, and people from all over the area. Back then, Carroll had J.C. Penney's, Cress's, Woodwork. You had two movie theaters. You had all these seemingly services and places you could go, albeit limited. Yeah. So, well, I'm big on revitalization. I think Carroll is primed for a renewal identity. And as president of the Carroll Historical Preservation, that's what we're working on, is that once you establish an identity that you can take pride in, then you can engage other people to buy in. And once you engage other people to buy in, you can create community development, which are opportunities for people wanting to come here. And so that's what we're working on, getting people to understand we're not a ghost town. We have treasures here, cultural assets, the library, the custom house. I mean, we're going to develop the national park services unless monies are cut somewhere down. The Freeman, the contraband camp, the old depot. There's things you can develop that would allow people to say, you know what, I want to go and see what's in Carroll. If nothing, just to absorb what happened there. Recently, I was in New Orleans and listened to Wendell Pierce talk at the National Preservation Fund conference. He's from New Orleans, and that's the birth of jazz. And he said, people from all over the world come to New Orleans. They want to see the location where the birth of jazz started. It's a parking lot. Cars park on there. But he said people like from France, Sweden, they just stand there and just absorb what might have been. Carroll has a lot of that. But you got to talk it up, and that's what we're working on, is trying to instill in our population, people that are still here, take pride in what we have. Yes, there are challenges, but take pride in what we have, and once you do that, you can build upon that. That's a building block for something else, and you can grab people's attention. I think I kind of mentioned it earlier. It needs revitalization. There needs to be an all-out effort to revitalize this natural resource assets that we have. I think many of the residents do not understand what we have. I think the region doesn't understand what we have. And surely the state doesn't understand what we have. Because if they understood what we have here, they would be doing a lot more. The confluence of the rivers. I know the Carroll Port Authority, I haven't seen that, but you got river and rail, you got an airport. Some states would die to have an area of this kind of magnitude of natural resources to want, you know what? We're going to put all our efforts into Carroll and build up, start something fresh here. There's a town in North Dakota, Medora, North Dakota, population 120. President Teddy Roosevelt Library is being built there. What, 40 million, maybe more, I don't know, it's million, 120. They see the value in the town. That same thing can happen in Carroll. You have to see the value. And that's the reason why I said people have to see the value. I see it. My wife sees it. You have to see the value. But Medora, North Dakota, 123. But if you go on there, I think the library is going to be completed this year or next year. It's beautiful. And then once you do that, you can build hotels. I mean, look at Ward Chapel. That's a dream there too. People don't understand. People walk by Ward Chapel all the time. I didn't go there, AME Church, but the history in that church. You look at the cornerstone. You see names of individuals from 1863 on. You see a Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass came here 3 times to Carroll. He came 3 times. But you can do a program around that. You know, it's going to cost millions of dollars to do what we want to do, but I think it can be done. Turn the sanctuary into a community space where you can have symposiums, weddings, but downstairs a social justice museum that is interactive, digital, and get on the Heritage Trail. There's a couple of them, and people have approached me. We could do the Civil Rights Heritage Trail, and we could do the Southern Illinois Heritage Trail, starting in Golconda. You know, 3-day. We're going to do the Shawnee, and then we're going to do the Shawnee Hills, Anna, and then we're going to come to Carroll. So there's heritage trails that I'm big on, and what I would like to see. That's my vision. I'm a vision kind of guy, and sometimes people don't see my vision, but I see it clearly, and that's what I can see that we can do here in Carroll. Well, one of the things that I recognize, and I think this is not just Carroll, it's a United States issue, is to get back to civics, understanding your history, your geography, because those that doom not to learn from the past will fail. And I think the reason why we're having some of the problems today, in light of what we're having today, is that those people, I don't care what color you are, white, black, or whatever, don't understand the history of this country and the world. All you need to do is read about the freedom seekers, the Jewish people who escaped harm. But we're back where we are again, unfortunately. So I would say that read your history. Schools teach civics. You know, interact with your students. And once you do that, you get a sense of pride. I have a pride about myself. I know where I come from. You know, you can't tell me who I am. I know who I am. I have pride about myself. I'm sure you probably heard it once you leave. So I won't say that. No, I think pretty much all my life I've been a purpose-driven person, think out of the box kind of person. Always pretty much optimistic about what I can do. And so I think that's the reason why, you know, I'm retired. And I ask myself, why I'm still working this hard when I'm retired? And I know the reason why, because you want to see something good come out of this. And what I'm saying, Carol, in terms of a product that people can be proud of. And that's happening, by the way. Whether you black, white, or whatever, people are coming to the Carol Magnolia celebration. They never been here since they left. And, you can see it on Facebook. I'm from Carol. Prior to what we were doing, people weren't saying that. They were going on, letting the other people write the narrative, Ghost Town and all that. No, I'm from Carol. And if you look at it, we're all over the world doing magnificent things. And so that's a product of what we're doing at the Carroll Historic Preservation Project, giving people permission to say, yes, I'm from Carroll.